BBC Two goes in search of another clue to the past now, joining in the determined efforts of one man to discover the whereabouts of Sir Francis Drake's final resting place.
There must be a beginning to any great matter, but the continuity until the end, until it is thoroughly finished, yields the true glory.
We've got a memorial to him in St Andrew's Church, a small one. We've got memorials all over Plymouth to Drake. We've got a tablet in Westminster Abbey. I think we've done quite enough. I don't think the man should be disturbed.
I think the sight of him coming up the Thames on what I would like to see on a British warship and being commemorated by lying in state where you'd have a chance to file past the coffin, I think that would be a great national occasion.
I don't think it's our job to interfere with an historical fact that he had full burial at sea with due mourning at the time. There are the contemporary accounts which demonstrate that, and let him rest in peace.
I admire his courage enormously, and I do hope for his sake, if one person, if it were granted one person should find whatever, if anything is left of Drake, I would hope it's Michael Turner.
If you were standing here 400 years ago, there'd have been precious little of a Plymouth skyline to view. Plymouth Hoe would have been little more than just wasteland, and if you looked out onto the Sound, there'd have certainly been no Royal Navy to look at. If one man is responsible for all this, it's this man, Sir Francis Drake. He transformed the standing of Plymouth. In fact, it can be said that his achievements turned England for the first time into a world power. And while he was doing all that, the people of Plymouth would have used this particular vantage point to see Drake return from his many voyages. That is until one day in 1596 when they were told Drake is dead and he will never again be seen on this particular horizon. That is until today. Michael Turner, a PE teacher from Burnham-on-Sea.
Buenos dias.
A PE teacher who spent 15 years following Drake's every footstep.
Señor Lanchero. Ah, buenos dias. Estoy muy contento de estar aquí con usted.
Today, he's in Panama, hunting for the fabled Spanish Royal Road. He's trying to hire a canoe. It's part of a lifelong journey. Its destination, the long-lost final resting place of his schoolboy hero, Sir Francis Drake.
This spiritual affiliation that I have had with Sir Francis Drake, I want to find where he is. I've been everywhere he's gone except for Cape Horn. And it's only natural. Where is that coffin? Where does he rest? Why can't I visit his grave like I can visit Nelson's?
Do you think the people of Britain have a right to kneel by his graveside?
Of course I do. You've got the right to visit anybody's grave whom you admire, to whom you wish to pay respects. And 1996 is the year that should trigger off the perennial desire for us to do just that.
"400 years ago, this was the heart of the Spanish Main. Turner is obsessed with Drake. He's lost his home, his savings, his personal life, all in the pursuit of seeing the world Drake saw. Today's adventure is seeking out the point where Drake made his name, his fortune, and his legendary reputation as Spain's greatest enemy."
There's no halfways. You have to go the full hog, don't you? Because if you're going to do a job, you may as well do it properly, especially when it's so costly and dangerous. So there's no halfway for it.
You've done this at real cost to yourself, haven't you, and your own life?
Oh yes, I've had my right ear slashed with a switchblade. I've been attacked on a bus in Rio de Janeiro by several men, and again I received no help. I've been in jail in Guatemala. But you must look upon life with its ups and downs, and philosophically speaking, people say the good outweighs the bad.
¿Dónde estuve buceando?
Today's a bad day. A 5,000-mile journey, and there's nothing to see.
Oh. Well, I knew it was the end of the rainy season. I knew the lake would be a bit higher, but it was inconceivable to have 7 meters of water over the stones. I mean, look at these trees. These trees are normally growing in the soil. In the dry season, you can walk here. Now, there's 7 meters of water beneath this canoe. And it's yet another example of how I've gone draking to another part of the world and been disappointed.
Drake's wealth and reputation was won in these Panamanian jungles. English ships sailed across the Atlantic to Panama for one thing: Spanish gold. It was here that the wealth stolen from the Incas in Peru was loaded onto the treasure fleets bound for Spain. And it was near this Panamanian beach that it all came to an end. When Drake first arrived at Portobello in Panama, he was unable to carry all the gold he robbed from the unwary Spanish. Within 25 years, he met a heavily armed town. On his last voyage, he was forced to flee, and suffering from dysentery, died. His men quickly packed him in a lead-lined coffin, and then buried him at sea. So was born the mystery of Drake's final resting place, a mystery Turner believes he's solved.
Obviously, he was probably buried with some honours. I don't for 1 minute suppose they just tipped the coffin over the side. But the service would have been short, it would have been brief, because the idea was, Baskerville's idea basically was, bury the commander, go home.
I know where Sir Francis Drake is buried because I've read all the primary sources that were written aboard his ships. And Thomas Maynard said that Drake was taken 1 league to sea off Portobello and buried by Baskerville on the morning of the 29th of January. The Victorian Navy first had designs on searching for Sir Francis Drake, but it was Sidney Wignall in 1975 who came here and carried out a big expedition which concentrated its search on Drake's Island behind me out along the Salmadina Reef. He was influenced by William Parker's evidence on the subsequent voyage that Drake was thrown over the side near Drake's Island. But that is 1 league off the village of Portobello, which is 1 mile into the cove, i.e. inland. But Drake must be buried 1 league off the general coastline, which is in line with the entrance here, because the ships would have no manoeuvrability if they were hemmed in by the reef and the island. So the funeral must have taken place 1 league out to sea off the coastline, and that's where we're going to look.
Turner's plan has excited those who thought Drake was lost forever.
I think the chances of finding Sir Francis Drake are about 75%. I'm quite optimistic because during the rainy season, when the seas are calm and the visibility is better, and with the technology that we will be bringing over into Panama, those are our chances. And the rainy season goes from about April, the end of April until December.
All that's left is to get permission from the Panamanian government.
Y permiten o aceptan el traslado de los restos de Drake a Inglaterra, nosotros no tendríamos ningún inconveniente en que eso se diera, absolutamente. Necesitaríamos solamente una comunicación oficial de las autoridades inglesas en un cambio de opinión a la que anteriormente dieron.
I've just had a very successful meeting with Professor Martinez, who has repeated the Panamanian government line, which I was told 2 years ago, which, if a missive arrived from the British authorities saying that Drake could be found, filmed, not disturbed, not to tell where the location was, or find, film and repatriate, the Panamanian authorities would readily acquiesce. That gives me great encouragement to pursue putting over the message to the wider audience that Drake should be found.
So, all that stands in the way is the opinion of the British. And you can't get more British than Plymouth's Sir Francis Drake Bowling Club.
We've got to bring him back to Plymouth because this is his hometown.
I would like to see him in St Andrew's Church, I think, really.
Bring him back on a boat. That's the best way.
I think he should come back. And it could be something like Sir Francis Chichester, when he returned after sailing around the world. I think if he was ever brought back to Plymouth Sound, he would get the same sort of reception.
And what about having the tomb in Drake's old church, St Andrews in Plymouth?
Well, there are various candidates, aren't there, for that? Obviously, St Andrews is one of them, and there's a bit of a history of the heart of various famous sailors being buried here. Their innards would be buried here, Frobisher and Blake, and then their bodies would be taken up to London, to Westminster Abbey, to be buried in state. With Drake, there's obviously St Budo, the church where he was married. There's Buckland Abbey, his home, family home. There's Westminster Abbey. There would be various candidates in addition to this church.
Would you like him here?
I think I'd be interested to talk it over with other people in the church and see what they felt. I'm not sure that I'd incline to that, but if people strongly felt that it would help Plymouth and be a focus, I suppose it could be possible.
And the wherewithal for the venture would come from his trump card, a group of Anglo-American businessmen led by the former chairman of ITN.
Everybody I know thinks it's a wonderful, imaginative idea that would be of great inspirational interest to people back here in the country, except authorities. None of the authorities I've approached has any interest at all.
And that is the problem. Panama won't move without the Royal Navy's approval, and their position is clear. There is no historical or scientific reason why he should be raised or found. We've received no official request to move him from his final resting place and see no reason why he should be disturbed. And it's a view shared by many of the people who studied Drake's life.
I think it's a nonsense, a complete nonsense. I don't see any point in having a sort of a tomb where we can go and sort of touch our hats in this country. It becomes a little bit sort of sad and a little bit pathetic, I think. He's in the right place.
I feel that he should be left where he is. I think the problem is that he was given a full burial at sea, which to my mind is the equivalent of a land burial, and we don't have any right to disturb that. Anybody that has any right would be the direct descendants of Drake, of whom there are none.
I say leave Drake, or what may remain of Drake, alone. Look for it by all means. Nothing stops anyone looking for it. And hopefully they'll even find it. But once found, leave it where it belongs. He was properly, decently buried. And that's where he belongs. And I think in a most appropriate position.
Turner is unmoved by such official opinion. He has no doubts about Drake's character or about where he'd want to be buried.
Being the lover of his country that he was, a passionate Protestant, a great server of the realm, and the attention that Drake enjoyed in his life, I'm sure in his afterlife he would like the attention of the subjects of his country 400 years later. Because where he is now, people just don't know where he is in England. If he were brought home, they would know where they could pay their respects to him. They would learn more about Sir Francis Drake because he would be amongst us.
The life and the legend of Francis Drake began here just to the south of Tavistock at Crowndale Farm. It's the first of many locations infused with the spirit of Francis Drake. This is the very centre of the Drake universe, where the Drakeometer would go off the scale, because this is the 16th century quayside where the Golden Hind and the Revenge would have set sail from, and where he'd have returned from the circumnavigation of the world. Drake was a very popular fellow indeed when he returned from those particular voyages. When he returned from one, the service here at St Andrew's Church was carrying on. But the parishioners thought, well, hang the sermon, let's go and see our hero. 1 or 2 voyages later, Drake becomes a very wealthy man indeed. And what does a young wealthy man do but buy a new home? How about an abbey? There aren't any monks left, of course. £3,400, it's a snip. Drake, nouveau riche? Certainly not. Drake did more than just sail a few boats around the world. He also built this, the water supply, Drake's Leak, for a few hundred quid. And it served the whole of Plymouth for 300 years. Drake called for these fortifications and paid for them with a tax on pilchards. Plymouth Hoe, the very heart of the Drake legend. Unfortunately, this bit, especially the bowls, is a legend. And the chance of spotting the Armada, well, he was already having a crack at the Spanish by the time they reached this point.
And that's the problem. Raising his body might raise some uncomfortable truths. For instance, we'd find out that as well as not leading the fleet that tackled the Armada, he even deserted it during the battle. We might also be alarmed to find that he began his career as a slave trader, and his wealth was won in that age-old business, piracy.
Drake is a very complex, as you know, very complex character. And simply to label him as a pirate is wrong, because it wasn't pirate, it was something more subtle. He was a privateer, possibly, and pirate part of the time, privateer part of the other. He was certainly a very greedy man. And yes, a slaver, well, yes he was. He went on Hawkins's first slave voyage.
His voyage is shortly after that when he starts going independently to the Caribbean in the early 1570s. I don't see what you can describe them as but piracy.
The definition of a pirate, you roughly get in any dictionary, a cruel man robbing ships. I mean, basically, a pirate will rob anything on the sea, including the ships of his own country. A privateer, on the other hand, is usually under license from his own government and only robs those of an enemy country. And Drake was a privateer.
I have to say that piracy is a reasonable description of what he did.
Turner is impervious to such doubts.
Estamos haciendo una película sobre los viajes del corsario inglés Sir Francis Drake.
He's on a divine mission to go everywhere Drake went and spread the gospel of Drake according to Turner, whether people like it or not.
Michael feels the spiritual affinity with Drake, the parent wanting to know where the child is buried. I feel in much the same way, through my reading, through my research. Drake's almost become like a friend, and it's as though you've got a friend buried overseas, perhaps a mate who's fallen at Flanders Field. You want to know where that friend is, so that you can pay your respects. I want to pay my respects and say thank you, really, for 35 years of inspiration and fun.
But Drake is more than just another dead white male in the history books. He's a legend. Spain and South America still use his name to scare small children. El Drac, a henchman of the devil. And in Britain, Drake is a spiritual father of a world empire who will be heralded by the sound of his drum to return to save us in times of peril.
It's the name of Drake, the idea of the Drake spirit, if you like, the idea of hang on, fight on, that's been used to rally the British people. Again, Drake is sort of being used, but not being repaid.
There is a glamour about him. He's an envied figure, as well as being a bit of a monster, who is still used into the 20th century as a sort of bogeyman to frighten naughty children with.
The legends that, Drake rode on a white horse down to Plymouth, and the water followed him in the lead. The legend that he simply chipped a piece of wood, and from the flying chips, boats appeared. He created a navy.
Britain then might be reluctant to disturb its hero, but not everyone. has such qualms. Argentina's successful explorer and salver, Ruben Collado, has already made plain his interest in the coffin.
Yes, there's been an Argentinian salvage diver who's been very successful in the River Plate, who would like to find Sir Francis as a personal desire. And I really think that if Britain doesn't launch an expedition to find Drake, someone else will do it.
This country has got to consider that if Michael doesn't find the coffin, somebody else will. And surely it's better that England find it than, say, Argentina or perhaps America. Do we honestly want to see Drake as part of some sort of Disney exhibition, exhibited as an English pirate? Because there is a man from Argentina who is after the body. I mean, if Panama ever gave permission and he got there before we did, I think that has got to be seriously considered.
What would you feel about that? Well, I think that would be a national disgrace.
National disgrace?
Yes. To us, if we allowed somebody else to raise Drake and he were to be placed in some spot in either Argentine or Spain.
Well, I don't think we can actually influence what another nation is going to do, and that nation would have to come to terms with their own conscience about what they're going to do with that material. But I have yet to be convinced that any coffin found is that of Drake's.
What is there to raise?
His body, surely.
There'll be nothing left of a body under the water, the depth that body's at after 400 years.
Well, if something is found, some relic, and it's brought back and it's said to be Francis Drake's body, would you be on the hoe?
I'd be wondering, along with many millions of other people, whether it really was Sir Francis Drake's body.
Little enough remains of the great empire of the Spanish Main. The string of forts and towns built on the proceeds of Inca gold have crumbled. What chance is there then that a single body in a lead-lined coffin has survived until 1996?
Even if it's a lead-lined coffin, I would expect the sea to seep in, and marine animals would have access to the body at a fairly early stage. And at this stage, what I would expect to find is the remains of the bones, but heavily encrusted with barnacles and other marine creatures. I would not expect any soft tissues at this stage.
Would it be recognizable as Francis Drake's body?
I doubt it very much that the skeleton would ever be identified as Francis Drake's skeleton, because for identifying skeletal remains, we depend heavily on dental records, and I doubt it if dental records exist.
But Turner has gone too far now to worry about an empty coffin. He's sacrificed his home, his savings, and 16 years of his life. He first heard of Drake when he was just 8 years old, and now, aged 40, there's only one place to go. And it's a place 21 fathoms deep and 1 league off the Portobello coast.
At least, if Michael finds it, he will be able to ensure its safety, either under silt under the seabed or on its way home to Britain. But I feel, quite honestly, that if it is found, the ordinary British man in the street, if he was asked in a survey, would say yes, bring it home.
Part of the legend relies on Drake not being buried in England. The idea that he will one day return to save us depends, at least in part, on the idea that he is far away under an exotic ocean. I think if he were buried in Britain, that part of the legend will go. And for me, that's perhaps the most important part of the legend. I don't think it matters about Drake's character. I don't think it matters any more about what sort of man he was, really. What we have is the legend and the myth. And it's a myth that the nation needs. That's why myths evolve. And the myth depends, at least in part, on Drake not being here.
If I can't do it, well, I accept that. but I shall never give up trying. If I gave up, then I might be unhappy in 30 years' time. But if I keep living and keep promoting the idea, even if I don't search for Drake, somebody will one day, because I've raised such an awareness of Drake and his lead coffin.
All this debate about where a man should be buried, maybe we should be listening to Sir Francis himself.
I bequeath my soul to Almighty God, my only Maker and Redeemer, and my body to the earth to be buried and entombed. So be it.
Until such time that the British government will support my innocent intention in locating Sir Francis Drake, the next best thing that I can do to commemorate 400 years of his passing is to deliver this inscribed lead plaque accompanied with plastic flowers to the seabed as close as possible to the location of my hero. My plate reads, "Dear Sir Francis Drake, since I was 8 years old, I have eagerly studied your exciting life. I wanted to see and touch your world. From 1980, I have traveled the globe to document pictorially and literarily your life and voyages. You have enriched my life. I place this plate of lead near your resting place as a sincere mark of respect and affection, exactly 400 years after your earthly departure. By me, Michael Turner, January 1996.
If it's possible to bring him back, he should be unduly honoured, and I believe he would stimulate, among young people particularly in school, great interest in the history of that time. And one other thing, if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it.